Hey everybody, blessings to all. Welcome to the channel. I'm Dane, your host. Hope you're doing well. Got a new video for you today in which I talk about the decline of rock music, a somewhat historical look. I guess you could say that a subtitle for this piece would be Why Rock No Longer Rocks. So let's go ahead and get started. This has been something I've been working on for, I would say, 2 months. I have a lot to say, so it's going to be a bit of a long video. I hope you'll stay through till the end. And part of my inspiration for this video, not the only inspiration, was because, number one, I did a smaller video on my reaction to Gene Simmons in a Dan Rather interview saying that the last legendary band that if it existed was this band. So if you haven't seen that, I'm not gonna I don't want to give that away, but I will mention them again, albeit very briefly. But it's since exploded from then excuse me. And there are a couple of other things that I researched about this topic that I will give credit where credit is due. So I'm going to be quoting one or two people. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, as a disclaimer, and this is for most people who listen and like rock music that has some rock to it, some aggression to it, is that one of the things that dethroned rock music is rap and hip hop. I'm going to mention it briefly here. Will I return to it? I might not, but we'll see how that goes. And when we look at rap and hip hop, for those of us who don't like it or loathe it, as is the case with me, it has a lot to do with the vulgar, the song WAP, and I'll leave it at that. But there is some great rap out there with respect to, championing social justice. So there is good rap, but this musically is not my cup of tea. Even the social justice stuff, you have lack of instruments. That right there is a turn off. I do respect rap as an art form, but it is music as well, but not the music that I enjoy. Again, lack of instruments. You have a cappella, rhymed couplets with a beat. And when I worked in sales, got a lot of people coming in at the time in the 90s to purchase rap, and so I would recommend something because I didn't sit on the bench. I listened to the parental, of course. What do you call it? When we closed, I would listen to the stuff that had cursing in it that you couldn't play in the store. But during the day, we had the clean version, if you will. That's the phrase I was looking for. And so I wanted to, be abreast so I could help the customers, and that, inform them and that kind of thing. And that was a lot of listening. And so I'd recommend things all the time, and people would say, "Oh, that's old." So I asked him, "So what do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, old. It's old. I don't listen to that anymore." And I thought to myself, gee, I'm still listening to stuff I listened to when I was a kid. So I just didn't understand that culture. But again, to each his own. So, right off the bat, I'm thinking, so you're just going to listen to what's trendy? Anyway, no staying power, that kind of thing. So anyway, here's number one. So rap is included here, but that's pretty much a given. So that's like intro. Here's number one. The Telecommunications Act in 1996. When Bill Clinton was in office. This was supposed to encourage competition. Free enterprise, in other words, which is a founding principle of this country. But instead of encouraging competition, it allowed mergers to occur, which can lead and has led to monopolies. And monopolies are against the law. There are some exceptions we have other competitors to the NFL, but let's face it, you can't compete with the NFL, that sort of thing. You have antitrust laws. What it did was it deregulated telecommunications and broadcast markets, so radio. It eliminated a cap on nationwide radio station ownership, hence the mergers. Therefore, a small amount or a small number of corporations snatched up the radio stations across the United States. And so what you get as a result of that is homogenized playlists on the radio. Radio station who cycles through the same 300 songs over and over again in a given day, if it's that many songs. when I was growing up as a kid here in New Orleans, I live in the suburbs now, but New Orleans metropolitan area. I lived in Orleans Parish up until 25, 26, and we had this wonderful radio station called WRNO, which they made up to stand for We're the Rock of New Orleans. And this is a great channel because they didn't play the same thing over and over again, up to a point. In the 70s and 80s, they didn't. It was really around the 90s that they started to do that. Again, 1996, right here. So, and they would have, tonight at 8 o'clock, we have a radio documentary on the Beatles. They were all kind of Steely Dan, all the Stones, all kind of the album hour from 8 to 9. We're going to listen to Judas Priest, Scream for Vengeance, new album that just came out. We're going to listen to Dawkins, Tooth and Nail. And that's how I got introduced to new music, was album hour on this radio channel. And so, but then of course that went away with this act. And I remember I briefly coached volleyball at the school that I'm currently at, a year and a half or 2 years. And I would drive one of the vans to said locations, home and away, so the girls could play. Half of the ladies would ride with me, half of them would ride with the other coach. And what I found was that the radio station that the girls would listen to, Q93, they would play the same rap and hip-hop songs every hour. So again, same problem. So what we have here as a result is, or are, gatekeepers no longer as individuals. So if you think about the band Rush, where would Rush be today if you've seen Beyond the Lighted Stage, or if you just know it because you're a Rush fan, or whatever way you got this information? You know that Donna Halper was instrumental, I forget the radio station, but in Cleveland, in getting people to listen to Rush. And in that documentary, people would call in, could you put on the new Led Zeppelin album? She said, no, not Led Zeppelin, Rush. Okay, so without these individual gatekeepers, gatekeeping is a double-edged sword. You got a small group of people gatekeeping, it's bad. If you have a large number of individuals, with individual taste, then you can get more out to everyone. So essentially what you have is a welcome to the machine takeover, corporate greed. Now, that's number one. Number two, MTV. You have the one-hit wonders, or one-album wonders, or somewhere in between. So what you have here is a lot of people, focusing on the single instead of the album, and not chasing after deep cuts. And so it's a large group of people, large demographic. So anyway, and here are some examples of bands or artists with one-hit wonders, or one album wonders, or give or take maybe two albums that are good, that sort of thing, or popular, that sort of thing. Dexy's Midnight Runners. Most of these that I'm going to list are, for the most part, just one-hit wonders. Dexy's Midnight Runners, Men Without Hats, Wang Chung, Flock of Seagulls, Autograph, TNT. They had that wonderful song, Knights of the New Thunder, kind of a hair metal band, right? After the Fire. The Buggles, which had the radio killed the video star. Of course, that's so prophetic, right? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Missing Persons, Katrina and the Waves, Tony Basil, hey Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind, right? Is it Nina who, 99 Left Balloons, Badness, which I think kind of foreshadows the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Soft Cell, Aha, Tommy Two Tone, Midnight Oil, Kaja Gugu, Mr. The Outfield Culture Club. They had a few hits, but you get my point. So while some people did chase the deep cuts on these albums and had bought, a lot of people were just interested. What's the other guy? Corey Hart, Sunglasses, and just a ton, right? Belinda Carlisle, you name it. And we've seen one-hit wonders before in the 70s. But here's some examples before I get to the but. Looking Glass with the wonderful song Brandy, Ram Jam, Black Betty, The Knack, My Sharona, and then he had another song with Good Girls Don't, but that was pretty much it. And then they had a second album which pretty much fell off the radar and wasn't very popular. But at least at this time you still had bands selling albums for their full album. Think Boston's first album, right? It's great from start to finish. Kansas comes to mind. REO Speedwagon, with High Infidelity. So many bands, right? Van Halen, people exploring those deep cuts. But MTV ended up messing that up in so many ways, and they ended up doing what the radio stations did, right, earlier, and that is just playing the same songs over and over in any given hour. So if you're looking for that, like me, I want to see that Uriah Heep video, the song off of Abominog. Good luck finding that, because you're probably not going to see it ever again, that kind of thing. Firing or losing or not rehiring new VJs to take place of the old VJs, Martha Quinn, was it Randy Jackson? I can't remember. Alan something. Anyway, and then replacing them with Adam Curry, who's essentially the owner's son. So it's alleged nepotism, right? And then it went from there. And then there's no music at all on MTV, and it's got all not social media, reality TV like The Real World and all that nonsense. And then it has an MTV2, and then even that went by the wayside. So you have just recycled songs over and over, and then again, all that disappears. But we can thank MTV for not giving us an exposure, or very little exposure, for new upcoming bands. They had the Basement Tapes, right, early on with Martha Quinn, that first or second year of MTV, and then that went by the wayside. Now, continuing with MTV, you have the rise of the hair bands, or the hair metal bands, or the glam metal bands, all terms that I cannot stand, because bands like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin have long hair, right? This is ridiculous. Anyway, so as I said before in the previous video, hair metal is nothing more than an upbeat, modernized party and or frat rock from the 60s or 50s, mixed with catchy pop hooks or a pop chorus. And the only thing metal is perhaps the guitar solo. Pop disguised as metal. The only thing glam about these bands is perhaps the look and the bubblegum stylings borrowed from, say, the Bay City Rollers, Sweet and Slade, with the pop catchy hooks or choruses, right? And they take the light and shade stuff too far. The concept, little to no aggression here. Again, party music, right? There's something wonderful about Led Zeppelin's Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, because it has that aggression still, despite the light and shade, but it doesn't have that party atmosphere. So it's cookie cutter party music with a heavy guitar solo. And so perhaps this is what inspired Dennis Miller's SNL skit when he used to do the news, and he put up, like 6 to 10 or 20 photos of different bands, and I don't remember them all, but I remember, one of them was Guns N' Roses. He said, it's just come to light that Guns N' Roses, and he lists Motley Crue, blah, blah, they're all one and the same band. So that was a slight to what I'm saying here about this cookie cutter issue. Bands like Bon Jovi, Poison, Motley Crue after their second album, Skid Row. Now, some of this stuff I do like, but not much. Vixen, Winger, Europe, after their second or third album, Europe, descends into this, hair metal-y thing, but their first two albums are not like that. Rat comes to mind. Def Leppard, after their second or third album, they cater to doing this as well. Kiss, once they take the makeup off with Lick It Up or Animalize, give or take. And to quote Ronnie James Dio, when this was all going on, the MTV in the 80s, he said that now metal was all about the look instead of the music. And he's totally right. The teased hair, the lipstick, the makeup, the spandex, the belts, the jewelry, the bandanas, especially Poison comes to mind. And that's all part to attract, sales, to attract the charts, to get a look-see on MTV for the ladies, to attract the females, as I said. So again, not about the music, to quote the late, great Ronnie James Dio. Now, sticking with MTV, in addition to the one-hit wonders, and some of these bands have those as well, you have the rise of new wave and post-punk. Some of these will fit into that category, some will not. The B-52s, Talking Heads, Devo, Oingo Boingo, Tears for Fears, Men at Work, Susie and the Banshees, The Waitresses, Psychedelic Furs, and Modern English. Those two, plus Spandau Ballet, are my three least, or I think the worst of the worst. Ultravox, Scritti Politti. I'll come back to Ultravox later. The Cure, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, Pet Shop Boys, I said Spandau Ballet, Simple Minds, The Fix, Squeeze and Split Ends, Simply Red, Fine Young Cannibals, and UB40. So, aggression is lost, and rock and metal now underground, and you have the new wave of British heavy metal, thank goodness, on the back burner, about to make its imprint. But the 80s is still, let's face it, Saxon and Samson and Tank and, Pang Tang, the Tigers of Pantang and Tokyo Blade, they're not making the mainstream. They're not making the charts. All right, now we'll come to boy bands, number 3, and I'm not going to belabor this issue, but I'm out of high school, so 86, 87, or 88, you have New Kids on the Block with The Right Stuff, and then you get about a decade later, thereabouts, you get the resurgence of boy bands with NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. Now let's go back a bit to the 70s. So not all of this is going to be chronological, but if we go back to 1970, you have Kraftwerk's first album come out, and here's where I have to quote Andy Edwards, who has his own channel over in the United Kingdom, in Britain, and he talks about Kraftwerk as one of the 10 bands or artists that ruined music. I don't like the word ruined. I would say set back, or, as he says, pulls the rock out of rock music, to quote him. That's where perhaps a subtitle here. And it's interesting because he mentions Kraftwerk in a previous video as one of the most important bands of all time. So while he recognizes Kraftwerk as one of the most important bands of all time, he also recognizes that they, got in the way of aggressive rock music. I don't like Kraftwerk at all. So here's some of the things that Andy Edwards had to say about Kraftwerk, and I totally agree. Their postmodernism, using machines, focusing on conformity because of the uniform dress, the cookie cutter mentality or culture that goes with those. He describes it as banal. I could not agree more. He talks about their use of they are the symbolic band of minimalism, which shares with pop music a lot. Here's the quote, another quote. Kraftwerk removed the rock from rock music. Think King Gizzard and the Lizard Gizzards, if I got the Izzards right parts. Their last album has a very Kraftwerk-looking album cover, right? Andy Edwards continues, the soul and the blues is now absent, and my quote here is, "Welcome to the machine again." And then he goes on to say, Andy does, that Kraftwerk is creating a culture of music to come that has no feeling, no emotion, and feels automated. So I had to include his ideas here because I have to give credit where credit is due, and I agree with what he has to say, all of it. And he goes on to say that the band influenced punk, new wave, and including hip-hop because of machine beats. He goes on to say that by the 80s, machine-like music in popular music, or machine-like music, is a central component of popular music dance and what he calls high-energy dance music. I'm not sure what he means by that. And here's my 2 cents. Because of Kraftwerk, and I'll mention them again later, you get mainstream solo artists like Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer, and Madonna get into the groove because of that new wave influence, which was in turn inspired by Kraftwerk. So Andy goes on to talk about Madonna, but I'm going to leave that part out of that. You can go watch his video on that. But I agree with him that Madonna is part and parcel as to why aggressive rock kind of goes bye-bye for a while, or in a grand sense. We're still suffering in a way, and I'll get to how there's still aggressive music today, but we'll get there. I don't want to spoil that. So here's my point so far. Kraftwerk, MTV, new wave, boy bands, everything I've mentioned so far, combined to punch rock music in the proverbial gut or even lower below the belt, making aggressive rock, as I said, underground and on the back burner now, dethroned, and chased off the charts quite a bit. And if you do the research, I don't have it with me. The last time any type of aggressive music, rock music, made the charts was in the 90s. So again, where's the rock in the rock music? Once again, to quote Andy Edwards, and you'll see this is a motif of this video. And it only gets worse from here. So this new direction, again, Kraftwerk, MTV, etc., the 80s, one-hit wonders, all the things I've said before. This new culture in rock oversaturates the culture. Okay? And the boy bands that I mentioned paved the way for following artists, female artists such as Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and down the road, Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa, Olivia Rodriguez, Lana Del Rey, Billie Eilish, Adele, and Taylor Swift. And then male artists like Justin Bieber and Ed Sheeran, which patented blend of pseudo hip-hop and pop. So you have this flux of the female solo artist, as I said, and the solo male pop star, again, the young pop stars, right? And so, once again, MTV, Kraftwerk, New Wave, but not boy bands this time, give rise to the emphasis on synth pop and keyboards in many ways, in so many ways. And let's see. Just want to make sure I didn't screw up my pagination here. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, so as I was saying, the emphasis, so much of an emphasis, too much emphasis and oversaturation of synth pop, keyboards, synthesizers, the technology, the techno type stuff, right? Techno led to a decline in rock music that actually, rocks. And this bleeds over into progressive rock bands like Rush and Genesis. You now have Rush sounding like the Police for 4 records straight. Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and sort of with Hold Your Fire. And there's an interesting interview. The video is kind of grainy. Us Rush fans have seen it a million times, right? It was played on MTV, I think, with Kurt Loder, etc., right? And they're smoking, and you can see that they're a little. They've been smoking a ganja a little bit, and Pert is smoking a cigarette at this point, and Lifeson's hair is really curly, so it's hemisphere / permanent waves era, and Pert was talking about what he was currently listening to, and that was the Police and Ultravox. Well, it's one thing to take inspiration from Ultravox and the Police, but wanting to completely sound like the Police, and I held my tongue in high school because I thought maybe I myself was crazy. I'm listening to Signals and Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows, and I'm going, this sounds like the Police with the simple, less complex strumming in the keyboards and the reggae, and I just kept it to myself. And lo and behold, decades later, I hear people saying this is Rush's Police phase. So I was right. Not that I have to be right. Genesis doing the same thing. Rush and Genesis, descending into chasing commerciality hits, right? So, and then, of course, I've mentioned this before, Ritchie Blackmore of Rainbow wanting, chasing singles and hits, because he was jealous of Foreigner and wanted something like that. So as much as I love Joe Lynn Turner, you got songs like Spotlight Kid, and especially the stuff on Bent Out of Shape, which is very, compared to the Dio era-led Rainbow, not as rainbow as Rainbow should be, so to speak. So chasing hit singles, losing their edge essentially, no grit, no spark, no complexity. All right, so number 6, American Idol, Simon Cowell. So I'm going to read a quote from Dave Grohl. Oops. You've heard this before probably. I remember this being in the news a while back, and I'm just going to read it word for word. So here's Dave Grohl about American Idol ruining kids' dreams to become musicians. Here we go. Grohl says, "When I think about kids watching a TV show like American Idol or The Voice, then they think, oh, okay, that's how you become a musician. You stand in line for 8 effing hours with 800 people at a convention center, and then you sing your heart out for someone, and then they tell you it's not effing good enough. Can you imagine?" He implores, "It's destroying the next generation of musicians. Musicians should go to a yard sale and buy an old effing drum set and get in their garage and just suck. And get their friends to come in, and they'll suck too. And then they'll effing start playing, and they'll have the best time they've ever had in their lives. And then all of a sudden they'll become Nirvana." Because that's exactly what happened with us. Just a bunch of guys that had some city old instruments, and they got together and started playing some noisy ash, and they became the biggest band in the world. That can happen again. You don't need an effing computer or the internet or The Voice or American Idol. Dave Grohl. So let me put my 2 cents in about how I think American Idol and Simon Cowell ruined aggressive music, or got in the way, or set back. There's a good subtitle for this video: how rock music was set back by all of this. There was a time when I would sit down and watch American Idol just for giggles with friends. We'd make it an event. We'd cook, and 5 or 6 of us, and that didn't last very long because it was new, and we right off the bat we started to see that it's just going to be all pop and R&B and nothing else, little country, right? And Cowell turns to, I think, a young lady and says, this is a rough quote, not a full quote, "How can we tell if you're going to be any good if you don't do a cover song?" So again, no rock, no metal, just pop, R&B, and a little country. So pop for the masses. Cookie cutter. And now you have The Voice and other things of copycat type shows that have come and gone, although The Voice is still around. And this is like the one-hit wonder problem all again. This is just all the artists that come out of American Idol. Most of them, not all of them. There's a few success stories, but most of them are just flavor of the month. Here today, gone tomorrow, or a novelty act that the shine lasts for about a year or two and then no more. There's no staying power. So we're back to what I said earlier. Number 7, streaming. You could argue that this began with Napster, but that the whole Napster thing could be a different video, which I may or may not do. Music has now become disposable. Background music now, instead of truly the art of listening and planning yourself, or not doing anything but listening and or dancing or moving around, listening to it as background music with the game on, with the sound off on the game, cooking, playing with your dog, looking at your phone. The list goes on and on, right? Walking, right? There's no more self-discovery for the individual, there's no more self-discovery, or there's no more individual self-discovery, because on the streaming platforms, it's all handed to you. And you have another disadvantage: you have low payouts to the bands. It hurts bands and upcoming bands who want to be musicians, those aspiring musicians, okay? So people resort to Bandcamp and Amazon Digital to download music, right? But the problem with streaming and resorting to the digital platform is that there are people like us who want physical copy. So we have a backup plan. What if the internet goes out and we can't stream, right? That kind of thing. What if the electricity goes out and we can't put on an MP3, right? We could have a battery-operated device to listen to music, that kind of thing. Or if the music, what if the file gets corrupted? I have the CD now, I can put it back in my iTunes, right? That kind of thing. Bands like Asomvel, Attic. There's a band that I just discovered a couple days ago called Fragmentary Solid Abyss. Instrumental death metal. I don't hear a lot of vocals yet in anything that I've listened to, thank goodness. But I can only find them on Bandcamp or YouTube. I can't buy a physical CD, and part of the problem is because of Spotify. You only get the MP3, or sometimes the CD goes out of print, and then the only way you can listen to it is YouTube or Spotify or digital download. But again, you want that physical copy, or so many of us want that physical copy. In addition, when it comes to streaming, in many regards, it can hurt the record companies from pushing physical product. Who suffers? Well, the bands who want to be heard. The record companies in some instances, because they may not be getting enough money. That's not always the case. But the record company in these instances can't promote said bands, and so not enough promotion, not enough recognition for these aspiring musicians, or even the musicians who are well known. And of course, we get hurt because we want that physical media to back up, as I already said. Think of the banks that got shut down because of the Microsoft thing. You didn't have a backup plan for that? All right. And streaming creates an endless vicious circle. Let me explain. Because now aspiring musicians, producers, etc. Resort to technology to create music, lack of funding from record companies, or they're now part of the streaming machine, or both. It's interesting when you have bands like Swans, a band I love, Marillion not so much, but both Swans and Marillion, there are others who have to resort to crowdfunding from merchandise and live recordings from their fans to make their next record. So, if aspiring musicians are at home using Pro Tools, Auto-Tune, AI, etc., these tools suck the soul and spirit out of the music, giving the music an automated assembly line feel, even if the music is heavy, which of course is rare. But so much of it is commercial pop. Return to the 80s. I say return because it's never, I shouldn't say return because it's never really left us. Essentially due to streaming, musicians can't stand out due to oversaturation. Singles instead of albums, as I said. We've come full circle with MTV one-hit wonders, that vicious circle. So we go from MTV with one-hit wonders to streaming with one-hit wonders, and it go round and round and round. And who suffers? The heavy acts who want to be heard, right? Contrast 70s produced great albums, as I said before, start to finished albums. Your Boston, or your Riot Heap, your Led Zeppelin, your Deep Purple, your Foreigner, right? Your Journey, etc. If you get a chance, take a look at a novel on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever. It's called Never a Dull Moment. I read it. I don't have a copy anymore. But it documents all the great wealth of music that came out in 1971. A ton of music. Rock music and folk rock and all that stuff. Take a look. Carly Simon, Cat Stevens, heavy rock, hard rock, classic rock, soft rock, yacht rock, you name it. Take a look at that. It's called Never a Dull Moment. I think it's got a picture of the Rolling Stones from the Exile on Main Street cabin in the background, something like that. Okay. Next is the record store. We still have record stores, but we don't have them like we used to. There aren't brick and mortar record stores everywhere. So like streaming, because record stores have gone bye-bye, like what streaming does is there's not enough area, or there's not enough self-discovery or individual self-discovery. There's no human element. There's no networking. You know, how many bands have people gotten to know because someone said, hey, you got to check this band out, right? Spotify doesn't really do in the same vein that occurred, right? So vinyl and CD sales declining. For a while, vinyl sales are back up. But again, trying to find, the CD you want can be difficult. Like, let's say, here's a CD I bought not too long ago. I had to buy this new from a third-party seller. Why? Because it's out of print. Or it's just not made anymore. Well, same thing. Or it's difficult to get. That kind of thing. All right. And record stores were a great place for gatekeepers in a positive sense, like Donna Helper or the radio station, because, again, they can give you, hey, listen to this. They would promote said bands, put all the posters up in the window in the store like Tower Records used to do, or, whatever. Like you go into Barnes & Noble, you look through the glass before you walk in, there's posters of what the new books are and that kind of promotion, and people start to talk, right? Streaming doesn't do that, not really. And so sales are going to suffer. Let's talk about grunge for a minute. Number 9. the godchild or grandson of punk in many ways. Now I have two sources here. In Andy Edwards' video, The 10 Artists That Ruined Rock Music, he talks about how Nirvana is the tombstone of rock, and what he means by that is essentially the same thing that Gene Simmons, my other source, said in a Dan Rather interview, which I talked about before. When Dan Rather asked him, when was the last iconic or legendary band? Gene Simmons said 1988, and then Dan said, well, what about Nirvana? And said Gene Simmons, okay, I'll give you that one. So both Andy Edwards and Gene Simmons and Andy Edwards and Gene Simmons agreed that the last rock band that had some heft to it, that was legendary, or both, was Nirvana. Because of alt rock was in the what Nirvana did, according to Andy Edwards, and he's right, is that for the first time you had alternative rock now in the mainstream. Right? So they took what the Pixies did and went mainstream with it because of that second album. All right, number 10, failed supergroups. Perhaps musicians resting on their laurels, perhaps not, but essentially, why do these failed supergroups, why do these supergroups fail? Why are they failures? Because of two possibilities: ego, and the chemistry wears off, or the chemistry wasn't in place for the synergy in the first place. GTR, remember that song, When the Heart Rules the Mind? There's no heavy, aggressive stuff there. The Squire Hackett release, what's this, 10 years old now? Them Crooked Vultures. Yes, in two ways. The Union album was nothing of the sort, because you got all the band members together on the same album, but both versions of Yes did not play with each other. And then, of course, one of those is Anderson, Buford, Wakeman, and Howe, and that didn't do much either. The Firm, The Power Station, Audioslave, Damn Yankees, Asia, Chickenfoot, Hollywood Vampires, Lou Reed, and Metallica. My point here is that these wonderful musicians who make up these bands could have done something else with their time and contributed much more to the rock and roll scene. Tied to the supergroup thing, in a way, is musicians who stop chasing the dream. Think of Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. While both have solo careers, Ace is better than Peter's from a sales perspective, and most fans like myself would agree that Ace more successful musically than Peter, although Peter's got some cool stuff. Ace plays on a track or two on Cat Number 1 album. That first solo album by Ace is fabulous. Peter's is not. Why not work together? Form your own band and compete with Kiss. Ace has put out album after album. We know that, but there's a lot of stuff there that's just not very good. So when I say Ace stopped chasing the dream, it seems like it's not so much maybe with him. Peter seems to have stopped chasing the dream because, on and off the radar. Ace kind of off and on the radar, but once he gets back on with Friedlich's Comet, that didn't last. Supergroup kind of thing perhaps, and then he goes solo. Not so much stop chasing the dream, but perhaps maybe his heart's not in it, or I can't speculate. I can only speculate. But there's something missing. Again, I think the thing, hire musicians around you. If not Peter, I think that would have been great. Hire better musicians around you and be consistent instead of have different. You have the Anton Fig, which is great, but you needed some bigger names with you, Ace, and perhaps it's ego, so hence tied to the previous thing. Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page does The Firm. Jimmy Page plays with the Black Crowes. What else has he done? He played with Coverdale. But boy, ever since Led Zeppelin broke up, all he's done was 3 different side projects. Again, those that I just mentioned. But his main thing was trying to eventually complete, which I think he finally did, with the soundtrack to Lucifer Rising, the soundtracks for Death Wish and all that. Who cares about that? And remastering, and then re-remastering, and then re-remastering, and then re-remastering the Zeppelin catalog. Waste of talent. That's what number 11 is. This waste of talent. Tom Scholz of Boston. I saw a video the other day. I didn't watch it because it's going to make me upset if it's true that Boston perhaps is a fraud of a band, because they toured, so how are they a fraud of the band? But it's all done, you know, from micromanagement from Scholes, or it's all him. Really, he's playing all the. I don't know. It's just so that's a question mark when allegedly. Now I'm going to flip the script a little bit, and so everything I've talked about is how different things have gotten in the way of aggressive rock music, where the rock is absent in rock. There's more of that to come, but now I'm going to flip the script a little bit and talk about how some heavy music got in the way of other types of aggressive rock. That it marginalized the aggressive rock. It gets pushed in the corner, not only by MTV and all the things I said, but also by what I'm about to talk about right now. Then the first is new metal. You've got elements of rap and hip hop. Even Alice Cooper jumps aboard the new metal train with 2 of his albums. So this music gets in the way of the potential for other or once aggressive rock bands or genres. So again, elements of rap and hip hop: Linkin Park, Cold Chamber, Korn, Deftones, Mudvayne, Limp Bizkit, the worst, absolute worst in my estimation, and the one that I do like here would be Slipknot. There's even that Monster Magnet video where the lead singer is in a spaceship and he shoots a spaceship that's labeled new metal. So, new metal. Imitation classic rock. 2 bands come to mind. There are a ton. Greta Van Fleet and Kingdom Come. Instead of finding, you know, your own niche, you just imitate someone else. In this case, both of them, Led Zeppelin. And that's all I have to say. This next one is also brief, number 14. The new wave of traditional heavy metal. Again, I tried listening to this. I still wanted to like some of this. I've listened to a ton of this stuff over the last year and a half, and I haven't found anything I like. It's just too derivative of the new. It's too derivative of the old wave of traditional heavy metal. So, and now we come to death metal and extreme metal in general. Death metal, black metal, anything that fits in the extreme metal category. The focus on death metal, I guess. Anything with a Cookie Monster type vocals, witch-like vocals, think Opeth. Any harsh vocals that's just over the top bad. No vocal talent whatsoever. For me, it creates a cultural. This type of metal creates a culture where you no longer need talented voices. Now, having said that, let me say I like Lemmy, I like Dave Mustaine, I like Matt Pike, I like Al Cisneros, I like Phil Anselmo, etc. But of those that I just mentioned, there's something unique about their vocals. They're gruff at times. Mustaine has that gruff / high whine pitch to it, and I like it. It's something that it doesn't get in the way of the music, but death metal does, and black metal. And it's an oversaturation is the problem of harsh vocalists and a combination with blast beats, and I like some blast beats, but that's gotten to be oversaturated, and it creates a lack. It creates a culture of a lack of originality. Exceptions: Catatonia and Enslaved. I love the music here, but I still can't listen to them because of the harsh vocals. Same thing with Opeth. Love the music, can't listen to the vocals. I still don't listen to these because the first thing I look for when I turn on music is, can I tolerate the vocals? And I just can't. Now, having said that, imagine, I did a video on this. In the video, I have the album cover of one of Enslaved's records and Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche. And in that video, kind of repeating it here, I talk about why hasn't it been invented yet where you take death metal, the music, and combine it with vocalists like Jeff Tate of Queensryche, Rob Halford, Bruce Dickinson, I'm going to butcher his name, Jorn Landy of Masterplan, David Coverdale, Ronnie James Dio. I think that would work. Now, I'm not saying, no, let me say this. Of course, you don't want vocalists like Steve Perry, Lou Gramm, you name it, Rick Emmett, you name it, because it wouldn't work. but the operatic style would with the death metal type music. So anyway, so again, extreme metal has created a culture where you no longer need a talented voice to get signed. And I wrote here, let me repeat that. Extreme metal has created a culture where you no longer need a talented voice to get signed, be heard. Who suffers? Vocalists who can sing. They're out of job or they can't get a job because we want that Cookie Monster type vocalist. Or fans like me who want, the heaviness the beautiful heaviness that death metal brings, but we can't get past the vocals. Again, imagine Jeff Tate singing for Enslaved. And so what we're missing out is the lack of, what's missing? What is lacking? Possible great bands. Okay? So as a result, almost no one stands out in the death metal community. Maybe musically, but again, for me and so many of us, the vocalists get away because the vocalists are too similar. Now, there's something I have here that ties to all this, or another example is what I call the music of exhaustion. And I'm borrowing this kind of from Roland Barthes is a literary critic, and he wrote an essay called The Literature of Exhaustion, where he said everything is done to death, everything's been done under the sun, everything is done the same. And then he wrote a companion piece after that called The Literature of Renewal or something like that. I love both of them, but here I'm going to stick to the music of exhaustion, tied to everything I've said above about, especially about the new metal and death metal, but overall it works. Cliched, new wave is cliched and all that, right? So I'm going to use a heavy metal band that someone suggested I listen to. I listened to it. I didn't care for it at all, and I'm going to stick. Here's the band, Burden of Grief, and the album is World Under Attack. You put it on. Here you have an intro. You have an intro, lasts about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. It's like a soundtrack with like a slow electric guitar intro with drums marching off to war type drum beat. And it's a slow build up to the heavy metal riff that comes in. Okay? And both that soundscape or soundtrack-like introduction, that overture, if you will, there's the word, is very cliched. The riff comes in, it's very cliched. It's very fast and furious and speed and thrashy, but it's so cliched. I've heard it a million times. And then the vocals kick in, and it's this horrible, cliched, near death metal vocals. I'm out. So you have a hat trick of cliched song problem here. Cliched intro, cliched riff, cliched vocals. Next one, number 17, modern prog rock. This is here is again the motif of where is the rock. You call it rock in the title, in the subgenre. You say prog rock. Where's the rock part? Examples: Frost and Sonus Umbra and Pineapple Thief. I lost the name of the albums here, but a friend of mine said check them out. And Porcupine Tree, the big one, there's some guitar there, but I talked to someone, texted someone, or commented back and forth a while back on this channel. Porcupine Tree has some crunch. It's not crunchy enough. Steve Wilson's vocals are too soft. That doesn't rock to me. The vocalist of Frost, the vocalist of or the music of Sonus Umbra in general is soft. Pineapple Thief sounds like a pop band. I don't know how you label them prog at all. I get why Sonus Umbra is prog, but it's too soft as well. You have to take a listen. And then there's bands like Animals as Leaders, which has some crunch, but it has no soul, it's no spirit. It's just way too technical. Where's the gusto and the grit that you got from, Steve Hackett in Genesis, especially Alex Lifeson in Rush. The kick-ass twin guitar from Rich Williams and Kerry Livgren of Kansas. Where's the rock component to this prog rock that's supposed to be rock? It's not. Then you have bands like Mars Volta and Spock's Beard and Acacia Strain. I don't hear how that's prog either. Maybe because it's avant-garde and stretches songs out, but other than that, I don't. So, to me, a lot of this modern prog rock is banal, boring. It's like watching a baseball game with no or little hits with respect to aggression. Well, Animals as Leaders has some aggression, but that's just too technical, and it lacks energy, or the energy is stale. Pardon the paradox or oxymoron. And finally, we come to AI, and I'm not going to belabor the issue because I have 2 or 3 videos where I talk about this, but just very quickly, the beauty of imperfection is missing in AI. Think Robert Plant's cough in the beginning of Whole Lotta Love. Think of Hammett's slip in Master of Puppets, which they didn't redo the song. It fits in great. It lacks human energy. It lacks human everything. Okay. If you have someone just working on a laptop to create an album, you don't have much in the way, if at all, humans working with each other. Creative synergy, creative chemistry. Instead, you have a machine. Okay. And AI, of course, has been foreshadowed by bands like Kraftwerk and hip hop, and dance, because of that auto-tune stuff, where you turn up the auto-tune meter so high that it sounds like computerized voices, like Cher's song, I believe, or whatever it is. So anyway, thank you for watching. Take care. God bless. Bye now.